All right, we are live.
Nice, we're live.
Welcome, welcome.
All right. Thanks for bearing with us. We're on Troy time. I'm going to make that a thing now. 4 minutes behind, we're on Troy time. All right, so hello, we're live. Thanks for joining us for this very special Archtober event where we, Mixed Signal, have been invited to interview a very important community organization here in Troy, Friends of the Mahicantuck. Thanks to Ethan Sedano and TAP for including us in Troy's inaugural October event series. We're honored to be a part of the architectural and design conversation here in Troy. And just a few other call outs and acknowledgements while we're getting started. We're broadcasting today from Studio Beta up in MPAC. A big thank you for all of their help and support of the podcast and this Archtober event. Additionally, we'll be having a gathering for follow-up conversations with us and Friends of the Mahicantuck at Cafe Euphoria after the live session if you'd like to join us in person. So we're joined by Jess Bennett, founder of Friends of the Mahicantuck, and Stephen Maples, who is both a specialist in transportation analyst and former member of the Troy Planning Commission. So welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
And
Yeah, just wanted to say, I think we're really happy to be involved in something like this. Thanks to Ethan and thanks to TAP for including us. I think this is the kind of thing that Mixed Signals was kind of hoping to be part of, a sort of a ragtag operation, but that could feature interesting stories like this that don't get enough light.
great. So to launch in, I'm going to provide a little bit of context, and then we'll get into kind of Q&A and interview questioning. But for anyone who is unfamiliar, Friends of the Mahicantuck is a community organization in Troy that was formed, as I just learned, in May 2000. So been around quite a 2020. Okay, I was wrong, but that's still a generous amount of time. To May 2020. And largely in response to a development plan proposed for the parcel of land at 1011 2nd Ave. A few of the things that we'll talk about this development proposal for the site is that it disregards Troy's comprehensive plan and the community's wishes for the site, as well as, from our internal conversations, has blatantly disrespected the site's Indigenous history, legacy to the tribe members, and as well as archaeological and ecological evidence that have been found on the site. Friends of uses an input from the community to imagine alternative visions for 1011. And the group has been advocating for the forest for years, sharing how the development proposal will not only destroy the city's last waterfront of old growth forest area, but it disregards the current Indigenous legacy ties, as well as this archaeological finding and ecological significance for rare species. We find this conversation important for many reasons that we'll get into, both in terms of the conversation and impacts for the local community of everyone living in Troy, as well as broader conversations about Indigenous land dispossession, why the city looks the way it does now and how that gets decided, corrupt governing decisions and policies that hurt urban populations, as well as the visual and experiential aspects of the city that these decisions help shape. And point also to a lack of accountability and feedback mechanisms for populations to shape their environment and curate their futures. So we'll get more into these themes and major players in this site context as we get into the interview. So launching into the Q&A, we thought we'd start with just a little bit of basic background. Could you explain to us in more detail, even briefly, when and how Friends of the Mahicantuck was formed in your main focus areas?
Sure, and thank you for that lead up. So just a little context, I'm, not a professional activist. I bought my first house in October 2019, and it sits right next to this forest, which I knew nothing about. And of course, a month after I move in, I look over, and there are men in my side yard. So I go out there, what can I help you? And they were archaeologists, and they spent an hour with me on a bitterly cold day explaining how important this site was. So it was very exciting as a daughter of a history teacher. And then the other shoe dropped, and they are speccing it out for the current owners who were the Golub family that owns Price Chopper, and they wanted to sell it to a developer who wanted to put this development on it. COVID then happened, and in April or May 2020, we saw a little blurb in the city council agenda saying, Developer Kevin Vandenberg wants to take the temperature. Maybe might put an apartment complex there. And because we all had all this time on our hands, 40 or 50 people showed up on the Zoom meeting, which again, this like intersection of everybody being at home and being on Zoom really, I think, helped us in an organizing sense. And we're just absolutely outraged at this. The developer was not ready for this sort of pushback, and even at one point exclaimed, "If you want all the bones and arrowheads, I'll give them to you in a box." Like it was
Jeez.
that bad. And so after that, some concerned community members and I decided to meet and create a grassroots group to fight this, and that's where Friends of the Mahicantuck was born. So it was Leo Bockinger, Sarah Bockinger, myself, and Sachem Hawkstorm, who's the hereditary chief of the Schaghticoke First Nations. 2 or so acres of this site actually sit in the town of Schaghticoke. And so that's kind of where everything was born. And we've had incredible support from day one from community members. I mean, every single person that hears about this is outraged, so it's an easy thing to glom onto. But so many incredible environmental and advocacy groups throughout New York State, whether it's Scenic Hudson, Riverkeeper, Open Space Institute, Sierra Club, Mohawk Hudson, and so many more have just from day one said, how can we help? And it's really snowballed from there.
Great. Oh, Stephen, did you want to?
I was just going to, fill my part in and just, I'm a fairly new Trojan. I just moved to Troy in February 22. Have a background in urban planning, and almost as soon as I came to Troy, Troy was in the process of updating its zoning code, and that was like, moth to flame. So I really got into it, did a lot of offered my opinion on things and that sort of thing. And basically, folks in the planning world kind of took notice and fast forward a little bit, they asked me to be on the planning commission. And I'd obviously known Jess and understood like what the struggle was at the 1011 site. And in that role as a commissioner, you have to be a fair-minded, person. You have to consider, and you're constrained by law and all this sort of thing. But of course, the mayor decided that that because of this project and the how skeptically these group of professionals were looking at the 1011 proposal. Basically, the developer put a bug in her ear, said we need and in fact, at one point, there was a text message that was sent, I need a new board. So that's exactly what happened. The mayor dissolved the planning commission. I would argue at the behest of this developer. And so I found myself not in that, position of public trust anymore. And while that is tragic, it also means that now I can speak my mind freely without, any kind of ethical, complications. So that's why I got more involved and became enmeshed with this struggle.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I mean, this conversation brings a couple of questions to mind. I think on the one hand, I'm wondering how much maybe COVID and being online has helped with the visibility of this site, and certainly your advocacy and promotion of the conversation, I think, has highlighted and filled this gap in kind of public urban discourse or local discourse that like we don't see on the news or maybe is not on the top of everyone's mind, but you're kind of folding the public into learning and finding the city more legible. So that's kind of one talking point I think we could move to. And then Stephen, with what you're saying too, I'm losing my train of thought for the moment. You made me think of something else too. I think it's like lack of accountability in terms of this conversation. I think it's folded in like lack of accountability or how public planning commissions conversations are actually getting out to the public. Like, are the modes of engaging with citizens really working anymore? Or how is the conversation getting out, and where could that be done better?
Can I append to that question slightly?
Yes.
The reason I think that's a really interesting question is that I think we're kind of obsessed with this idea that our institutions are failing us right now. Like that's one of the mixed signals themes,
Mm-hmm.
and we like to look everywhere that that's happening. And just my instinct, and I'd love to hear your perspective on this, is that the mechanism for public review or discourse around these kind of projects is very opaque, even though it
Mhm.
seems transparent. And maybe we need another way to do that.
For sure. Do you want to start with that, or do you want to start with this?
Wherever you want.
Okay. So yeah, I would say yes. I mean, it's. I think it's. There's no doubt that the our current institutions and structures are failing. I think the most recent example of that, we were at the meeting. Was it last month or a month before? Where the current board chair um, started all of a sudden started getting very interested in constraining the public comment, and this was only after being sort of begged and pleaded, like all of these people are showing up on their on an evening for like several hours to listen to unrelated things so
Yeah.
they can have their say their piece about what they think about this proposal.
And could I ask,
Yeah.
how is that allowed, constraining public comment, or how is that?
So that there is not
Seems
yeah, there's
shady.
not actually a ton in the Troy code that like kind of outlines this. There are some, sort of good practices, and there's
Mhm.
sort of open, the state open information, open meetings laws, and things of that nature. But the exact nature of what that public, comment period is, and even the period of time, and all of these things aren't necessarily like spelled out
Mm.
very specifically. So you do have these kind of situations, and we sort of noted that there is that lack of I guess to sort of draw back to your
Mhm.
point about the larger institutions, like this public body, it is an appointed
Mhm.
body, which that has its own concerns about democratic accountability in and of itself, because it's appointed by the mayor, and not the city council or anyone else. It's just the mayor.
Right.
But even further than that, it's sort of it's fair, it's undisputably a public body. What is
Mhm.
its purpose and its point? The idea is obviously to have some role of the public to weigh in on these planning matters. So even if it's not a direct democratically elected body, like that is its ultimate function. And the fact that they're that it's sort of we've gotten so far away from any kind of idea of like, well, we should be at least we should be engaging with the public in some way to inform our process. Of course, it in the charter, this is supposed to be a body of professionals. They're supposed to have planning experience, law experience, various kinds of experience that relate to real estate, whatever that has to do with the planning process
Mhm.
and the development process. The reason why is some of this stuff is pretty technical, and
Yeah.
it's it can go over people's heads, but I would argue if you're serving on a public board, it is your job, your responsibility, both to explain to the public what's happening, including the legal constraints that you operate under,
Mm.
which there are many for a body like the planning board, um, but then to also engage with the public, like to have some idea that like I don't know that anyone imagined the board to be a purely representative body. Otherwise, we would directly elect them or something of that nature. But to sort of see how, and this is certainly not exclusive to Troy, to see planning boards and other types of public bodies like this kind of get further and further away from some kind of idea of accountability to the public. Even things like down in New York City with the community boards that are,
Yeah.
To say that they're representative of the public is
Right.
that's a pretty tall claim, and and those are community boards. That's like right, the whole idea is that it's supposed to be like people of the community. So to your point, I think there is an ongoing crisis, and you can see it in our and not only on our planning board. I would hasten to add that there's several other city boards that are not necessarily thinking of themselves in terms of like having a responsibility to the public, um, and even if they don't always decide to go along with the public sentiment, there there should at least be some kind of a feeling of responsibility, if not explicitly in law. You should at least justify yourself to the public. Like you should at least say,
Yeah, right.
"Hey, this is why I'm choosing this," because there can be good reasons. Those legal constraints are real. Like a planning board, if they're going to deny an application, whether it's site plan, whether it's subdivision, whether it's one of these types of applications that comes before it, they need to be able to say, based on this section of this law, or this incompatibility with the comprehensive plan, they have to point to something that is an expression of democratic principles, of democratic will.
And
like
part of
the
what
zoning
you're
law.
saying too is like there's just the board isn't composed of the expertise to even really be making those
Well,
calls.
hold up. I think I want to step in here and just kind of like switch things up. We're diving deep into it. There's
Yeah.
two primary issues that I see in this topic. There's the issue of, yes, the bodies that we've elected don't represent us, right? That's issue one. Issue number two is there's a marginalized community here where an identity is not represented, even if you are the masses, which that's an issue number one. Issue number two, even if that system was in play, there's a marginalized group of people that get, taken advantage of. Okay, so, and that has a huge impact. I mean, we're at Mixed Signals, we're interested in visual culture, right? And so obviously the policy matters. Obviously social, like democracy and the representation of people matter a lot to us. But then what we've been looking into is what's the effect? What's the effect on the city? What's the effect on the visual identity of culture of the built environment, whether it's cities, buildings, landscapes, environments, whatever it might be in terms of like ecology. I think that's where we kind of dive deeper into, right? And so the question I have, Stephen, when I hear you speak about kind of the failure of the system is, how the hell did we get here? How do we get to this situation where we could talk about the larger administration of the country. We could talk about the local parties, like what we see in Troy, not representing the masses when they're out there. And like you said, there's community boards that's what they're there for, and they're still not represented. And then the question of, like, how do we get to the point where there are marginalized communities that we think are, we've talked about this as a group of like people that like Native Americans in this country that we think their story is ended, like the chapter is closed and it's in the past, and it's not in the past because we know today that there's still kind of discrimination, there's marginalized actions, there's actions applied to these marginalized group of people. And so I'm interested to kind of talk more about that, but also what's the effects that we see. I mean, Jess, when you talked about the kind of community center, the apartments that were planned to be developed, that is not representative of the community nor representative of the people that had their land stolen in the first place, right? And like that, I think we want to explore more, right? So I guess that's the question. I mean, we know that we're limited, and I think if we are able to kind of communicate why this happened, what the issues are, and how it relates to the larger public, because what we want to do is normalize this. We want to normalize the people that who we think their chapter has been closed, like meaning that there's no more trauma. There's of course a lot of trauma. So I mean, maybe we can expand on that if you guys have ideas on that.
Yeah, thank you for saying all of that. And, as we're kind of delving into that, I do want to point, there have been many points in this process where members from the Schaghticoke First Nation, Akwesasne Mohawk have come down from the North Country and Canada. Members of the Ramapo tribe have come up from the Southern Catskills, and certainly the Stockbridge Munsee have written in many ways. And the reception from the city council has been nothing but contempt, cutting them off mid-statement.
Of course.
I mean, it was truly embarrassing as someone who lives in this city to see how that went down.
That's the dehumanization in action,
Absolutely.
right? Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'm sure this wasn't intentional because this would have to have been on their radar, but the city council issued their negative declaration, so saying that there is no adverse impact from the clear cutting of this forest on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women's Day, for which we had a big kind of ceremony and gathering, and then peace march to the city, and the now mayor, then city council president, just walked right by. Oh, hi, like just no idea of the significance,
Mhm.
no idea of like the weight of everything that's going on, and how important it is that these people are represented in this meeting for this land.
Yeah.
Like it just,
I have to be honest here. I'm also kind of new to Troy. I'm kind of between here and the city. And what's really bizarre about this place is the fictionalized character that's posted everywhere kind of bothers the living hell out of me. We know it's not real. We know this person's not real, but this is the land of Uncle Sam, right? He's buried here. He's not buried here. He's not real. I know there's like a fictional, or there's a character he's based off. That's really weird. I think that plays into the kind of ideas of colonization and kind of this imperial grounds towards the Native Americans or whoever it might be. I mean, we know that like a lot of the refugees here are here for a specific reason. They're here because their home countries got destabilized between a couple of countries that decided to do some things in those countries. You know, we call that modern day imperialism, called war effects, whatever it may be. And to me, the kind of the patriotism that's kind of built in this country and like the fictionalized character, right? Growing up, I saw two characters. There's the Native American character, and there's the kind of cowboy American. And I think that has like a huge effect. Like we grew up already kind of discriminating the natives, right? We see them as barbarians, we see them as primitives, and that's kind of built in. And when we think about, I mean, you guys told me a story about eventually when there was pressure built up, there's this idea of like, well, we have to kind of be respectful of this group of people, right? That we've already dehumanized by taking their lands and saying, okay, we're not going to give you this land. We're going to build something that represents you. And what does that look like? A cartoon sketch of what they think Native American is, right? Because that's already racism and dehumanized identity that we think is okay. We've already normalized it. And I think what we want to do is, I guess a question for me as a designer, how do you reject that normalization of dehumanizing this identity? We just kind of all put them under one bucket. They're super diverse, right? And we know nothing about it. I know nothing about it. So, you know, like the only thing that I can decide, and this is really fucked up, I think of casinos, right? And that might speak for some people that are, you know, they have a legitimate business and they run it. But, you know, for them, it's probably, I'll make money to survive as long as I like pretend to be Disneyland for these people, right? Because that brings me money. So there is a cultural identity effect of this dehumanization that I think is interesting. And Troy, out of like all the areas around here, has a specific character that's against their own identity, right? If that makes sense. Like Uncle Sam is like in conflict to them, even like them being kind of native people, marginalized people that had their land stolen, of even existing here. If that makes sense. That makes sense?
Yeah. Well, and I think to that point too, right? The American imagination of the Native American Indian is a very like Western plain style, and you see that represented through like teepee and these things. Here, it was totally different. It's like longhouse cultures and totally other ways of inhabiting the land and building. I mean, even in the city of Schenectady in their stockade district, there's the community wanted a sculpture to commemorate the indigenous inhabitants, but it's a Plains Indian. It's not
Right.
a Mohegan or Mohawk or Iroquois nation figure. So it's, you know, nice that they wanted to do that, but total misrepresentation.
The memorial on like, if you drive 87 south, you get to like this highway underpass where there's carvings engraved. And you see that in America everywhere. Like a tribute to these people that used to be here. It's to me, it's kind of disrespectful. It's like that's a tombstone more than anything else.
Right.
So I work for the Department of Transportation, so I actually know the story behind
Oh,
that exit. So that exit was justified because we needed to serve the airport. There's all these designs on expanding the airport, bringing more service, and you know, I think that assertion is somewhat questionable. Like, you know, I don't know that much infrastructure was needed, but you know, it got built, and in the process of doing so, remains were recovered.
Oh, really?
And I think it was also the Stockbridge-Munsee were involved with that project, and obviously, you know, they understandably were, you know, fairly upset with like, you know, how all of this went down. The notification procedures at that point in time were good, not great, and they got much better under the Biden administration. The DOT under Pete Buttigieg was this was actually like a pretty high priority. So a lot of those coordinations are getting a lot better. Now there's still the problem of and which relates back to 1011. There's still the problem of the overwhelming amount of disturbances, construction, all of these various lands that are important to a whole variety of people, and they have they might, if they're lucky, if they're one of the federally recognized tribes that has some access to some amount of money, they might have a staffer who is in charge of like answering sometimes in the hundreds, sometimes in the thousands of notices of like, hey, this thing is happening on lands that we know to be,
Wow.
indigenous lands.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Yeah.
Can you clarify for people what the federally recognized tribes are?
I
Or like just a summary? Cause
yeah. Well,
I think it's interesting and important, and I had never heard of that actually
Yeah.
before you explained it.
Yeah, that's why I'm
in our
Yeah.
last conversation.
so I can't claim to be an expert in knowing the exact requirements and things, but there is a long process of getting federal recognition, and once you get federal recognition, then that entitles you. Yes, there's 574 federally recognized tribes. So there is a lot of, like it says, like there's a lot of federal funding and procedures that then that those tribes are allowed to be or are mandated to be part of. So like in all of these projects that I was just talking about, like if you're not a federally recognized tribe, there's no communication, there's nothing.
and
No
that's important to,
representation.
and that's why I wanted to kind of clarify that there are actual, like, I kind of thought that, okay, if you're a native tribe, you obviously get federal recognition. Why wouldn't you? But so there's a policy on top. Again, this is more dehumanization through policy, not even
yes.
through like identity and kind of stealing land. This is just like a policy that's in play
Mhm.
that I can deem you as invisible
Mhm.
or visible, right?
And
And
it's-
that's weird.
And it's even one step worse than that, because even if you go through the process of getting federal recognition, that's not always a great thing,
Right.
because then there becomes this question of who is part of your tribe and who is not part of your tribe, and I'm aware that there is a counter movement against federal recognition, because it really you start getting into a lot of this like blood quantum stuff that's really pretty gross, and a lot of these folks are kind of horrified that they have to do this,
Right.
but because the federal regulations say like, well, you have to be able to point to like these people are in the these people are in the tribe, these people are not in the tribe, and then like you have to have some kind of way of delineating, again, to our Western ideas of
Yeah. It's
of
yeah,
law.
total imperialization and control, right?
Yeah.
It's occupation in a way. It is total occupation. It's you're recognizing them, but you're kind of like occupy the way that they move. It's not like a true occupation that we might think of it in other places in the country or in the world, but it is a sort of control that is it kind of takes away their resources when needed. And again, things I never even thought about, right?
Mhm.
Because I mean, I'm guilty of it. Like the world that we live in, has me forgetting who they are, and it has me forgetting kind of that their chapter isn't closed. And that's what I was trying to say before. And that's why I said the Uncle Sam thing's weird to me. Because as long as there's a poster child for what this town is, that poster child is counter to the identity of this marginalized group.
And it's also a little weird that like the poster child for Troy is a guy who was a war profiteer. It's
Yeah,
like, wait,
exactly.
that's the
Yeah.
guy? Like,
Really, he was a bricklayer who like fell on hard times, got into packing beef.
Right.
And was it World War One? Maybe a little before that. The government is who commodified him into this. Like he was not
Right.
this guy that we know of with the hat.
And
Like it was pure propaganda.
Yeah, so it is propaganda, and I don't know the story of Uncle Sam. And what's the real character or the real person that this character is based off? You guys
Sam Wilson.
Sam Wilson. Okay, so Uncle Sam, the way I always have seen the propaganda, has always been America needs you. What does that mean? America needs you for war.
yeah.
America needs you for expansionism. And so that's what I'm saying. This is counter to the marginalized people because Uncle Sam represents expansionism through war, right? So like, how could it even exist? How can we even like expect respect in this place if that's the poster child?
Well,
of this
it's
town?
also a bit of a soothing thing, right? Like it's like we can't talk about the real history of the place because that's upsetting and somewhat violent in a
Right.
way. So you're going to supplant it with something that's convenient and basically,
Triumphal and-
yeah.
Well, it's cute to a lot of people. It's like, oh, Uncle Sam, like that's a travel tourist destination. It's like, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like
Yeah.
a mascot. It's
Yeah.
like an urban
Yeah, but the mascot is it.
Yeah, it's war.
It's propaganda for expansion. Yeah, so
Totally.
it's like that's the thing that we don't think about because we're so dehumanized or like desensitized to this issue of like
Totally.
expansionism. We just think it's a cute character that you might as well see in like Disneyland.
Well, and I wanted to talk also about the importance of this site in terms of this Indigenous
Yeah.
history. There are hereditary claims to the site, and is it true also that several of the or maybe you'd mentioned one of the tribes with claims was federally recognized and then was later not recognized?
So my understanding of the Schaghticoke First Nations, and this is part of the ridiculousness of the U.S. government saying we federally recognize you as a tribe, which I should have looked up before this and can't recall totally off the top of my head. But if you look up what hoops you need to go through to become federally recognized, it is nearly impossible. It's something like you need 400 years of records in the colonizer's language. Like,
Jesus.
like
That's
it's
crazy.
that degree of
400 years?
it's-
We haven't even been here for like America's not even 400 years old. Like it's already
How about
rigged.
Dutch? Yeah, it's worth looking up because it again will just make you fuming angry. But yeah, my understanding is in the history of the Schaghticoke First Nations, which we know are here, and this site, 2 acres of it are still in Schaghticoke, right? So we're still holding into some of these old names. Did have their federal recognition stripped. Which is part of when I started looking into all of this. The Stockbridge Munsee, however, are a federally recognized tribe. And I don't know that there are land claims. I don't think anybody's saying this is our clan, but these are the Mohican homelands, and the Stockbridge Munsee have been. They have written to the city. Their homelands are now Wisconsin. But there are some folks who have started moving back this way, which is quite in the last 15 years. So it's very significant. But even as recently as in the last few months, Dr. Jeffrey Bendremmer, the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Stockbridge Munsee, wrote to the City Council, and said we are or the Planning Board rather, we are unequivocally against this development, but we can't do anything about it. The Sachem Hawk Storm from the Schaghticoke First Nations has shown up at meeting after meeting. It should weigh heavier. And the city does have capacity, even though this is technically private land, if they wanted to incentivize a different piece of land somewhere else, whether it's land swaps or pilot agreements. If the city doesn't want the land developed, they can make it worth their while to have somewhere else be developed, and these developers are in it to make money. None of them are building their final opus building. This is like a schlocky architecture, and it just is not a priority. From day one, the now mayor, then city council president, has said, "Oh, I went to high school with the developer." Like the fix has been in from the beginning, and that we've been able to delay it for 5 years is just a testament to the community dedication to this.
Right.
Yeah,
And one of the upsetting thing about that, just to insert really quick, sorry, is like, like we're all designers, architects, builders. I want to see development in Troy. I want to see developers feel like they can come here and make housing. We need it, and there's plenty of people doing that in the right way. It's just kind of absurd. Like there's like you say, there's so many places to take on this project. It wouldn't be difficult to imagine a better spot for multifamily housing like that.
Yeah, I think it's when you look at one of the other projects that came before the commission when I was on it was the 1818 Fifth Avenue,
which is going up right now.
It's going up right this very moment, and I think that they did a relatively given the modern constraints of what architecture is, I think they've done a pretty fantastic job in trying to match the architectural cues of the city. I'm really trying to embrace that the golden age, kind of Gilded Age aesthetic of Troy, trying to capture that Victorian. Is it ideal? I don't know. I don't know. But I think what they are doing within the bounds of what modern architecture is pretty great. So there is that happening.
Mm-hmm.
There are good projects that are happening, and there's plenty of places in Troy I live in South Troy. There's an entire waterfront that it granted is, there's a lot of brownfield happening there, but there's a lot of money not refurbish, remediate those brownfields. And we would welcome the size and intensity of what the proposal at 1011 is. We would welcome that in South Troy. It's right there. So there is that, to there are plenty of opportunities. And to tie it back to your point about kind of tapping into the sort of settler colonial thing is, I mean, we've overheard the developer talk about like, oh yeah, like he wants to like have put his stamp on a place, and like, using language that's very like, no, I need this, like I need to like go into this virgin land and like tame it or something, and it's just very, what is why there are numerous places, both very close by up in Lansingburg that are ripe for redevelopment. In fact, the community has been screaming out for the former, what is it, the former Price Chopper.
Yeah.
That
Yep.
people have been screaming for the redevelopment of that lot, but we just like, because it doesn't make this guy enough money, we're going to sully this site that, like, and Jess can talk more about, like, we've heard about like this site was not just important to the Scaticoke or the Stockbridge Muncie. It was known throughout the region as this like very important quarry. And it's kind of interesting and important in that way because it was sort of understood as like, well, this is a common good. So it wasn't necessarily like a turf battle necessarily. I mean, there may have been turf battles because people have been around here for literally thousands of years. So, but the point is like many different peoples interacted with this place. And I think that that's pretty special.
Yeah, and I think like what I start to think about, we've had this conversation where, look, there's an idea of good design, right? And when the public cries for good design, please try to provide it, right? We voted you in for a reason, and so try to respect the needs of the masses. The other thing is, okay, let's assume that this land was never owned by anybody, nobody got kicked out, it wasn't stolen. It's still like still just, there's trees, there's ecology, there's animals, there's like it's on the water. You're disrupting the piece of what exists. For what purpose? Bad design for money. That's the thing. It's like if this area was used for, picnicking, playing in the fields or between the trees or whatever it might be, and there's a certain memory that people have, say, I remember this place, right? And you're destroying my memories. And this could be sacred for people that grew up 50 years ago in this area, 10 years ago in this area, or 200, 300 years ago in this area. It's a fact that they're disrespectful for the purpose of what? An individual's capital gain, probably a person that donates to the politician. It's just like a whole gaming cycle. And I don't want to dive too deep into it, but just to kind of point out the issues, it's like, okay, look, if you want to make it about maybe people that had their land taken away from them, that's one of many issues. It's also the community cares about this. And it's very clear that there's certain people that are not interested in what the people want. And he kind of brought that up at the very beginning. And so I just kind of wanted to loop back to that because also this isn't the only place where this happens. And you've kind of mentioned other areas in the region where, certain land is now owned by people that they bought it a long time ago for real cheap. I wonder why. And they don't know what to do with this land. They're like, I might as well develop it. But, not every land is intended to be developed, right? Like there's a ecological cost to that. And so, it's just interesting that there's many avenues in which someone can say, hey, you're kind of screwing up this community for many reasons. And, like I could think back to, like, architecturally speaking, in the 1950s, let's say 40s onwards, after World War II, there was this initiative to build public housing, right? And there ends up happening this situation, the kind of an awful situation where the housing ends up becoming problematic for the people that live in that area, right? To the fault of not necessarily the buildings so much, but policies of upkeeping those places. Anyway, my point is people grew up in those places, and you would think that they don't want to live in those miserable situations, but they wanted to stay. They didn't want those homes destroyed. I think the most famous one is Perdago in St. Louis, and the question of memory remains. So even when something is seen as awful to those that live in there, you have to still listen to the community of saying, well, my memories, my children's memories and kind of happy moments, even awful moments happen here. Who are you to take it away from me, right? That's a question in terms of, because that's public housing, right? So like the government says, I can erase this if I want. And so there's a history in this country where we don't listen to the public. And I think that's important. It's not necessarily, I mean, it's even worse that it happens, that we take advantage of kind of the natives in this country that had their land stolen years ago, and we kind of don't even see them anymore. But it's a larger problem in this country, I think.
Well, and I think we've spoken about this, like discussing what's at stake here, or someone who's maybe unfamiliar, anyone who's unfamiliar, what does this communicate to someone that doesn't live in Troy or is not proximal to the site? And I think what we're getting at is there's really a lot at stake, like our relation to history, and I think what Walid is hitting on too, like the accountability to the public or following the public voice, which I know we have been speaking about, but it's just so wild that there is such a like community conversation and kind of clear vision, and even this guideline in terms of the comprehensive plan, which I was reading earlier, and it's wild, right? It starts with the history of Troy and identifies the Indigenous history, and then very quickly departs from that and has no kind of recourse or accountability towards it. But yeah, it's setting up a really terrible precedent in terms of how we are related to history, or how public bodies are responding to local communities.
Yeah.
So,
I think like so I would just say a couple different things. Like there's, I think that the comprehensive plan that was drafted, I think it wasn't bad. It was, in fact, in many ways, I mean, it was a dramatic improvement on our documents that were there. Same thing with the zoning, a dramatic improvement
from the 1960s.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's getting, to touch on your point about if you're moving around Troy and other places, because public entities are very assiduous at following exactly what the law is. As you move around Troy, you'll notice that a lot of the worst urban design is on public housing. It's unfortunate because like they were just abiding by the law at the time. This is what the zoning said, so they did what the zoning said. But it's fantastically terrible, urban design. Also, I would be remiss if I didn't mention, if you haven't seen the Pruitt-Igoe myth, you must watch it. It's
documentary.
unreal. It will change your understanding of public
it does
housing
flip
if
the
you know
narrative a bit.
Yeah. So sorry for that minor digression, but to bring it back is these documents that are, I think there was a lot of folks in Troy that I think had a lot of great ideas. We had a lot of folks who were coming out of the new urbanism movement and the smart growth movement, and I think a lot of those folks are still around, and they, but I think there has been sort of a over the past 5-ish years or so, there's been a little bit, and I think for a variety of reasons, there's been sort of a movement away from like we don't care anymore. Like yeah, that's what the law says, but we don't care anymore. Yeah, you wrote that nice plan there, but we just don't care anymore. And while at the same time trying to be like, but we're the ones who are doing economic development right, and you're like, okay, like based on vibes, okay, vibes, it's vibes, it's just vibes. Because as anyone who's looked at who's investigated and explored smart growth and new urbanism, like I mean, it's so much more economically productive. So you have this kind of weird synthesis of a lot of different things happening in Troy, where I think you had some good-hearted people who were trying to make a difference, and largely succeeded, I would argue. But then I think in the way that kind of putting it into like a radical frame, I think you had more of the liberal class that wanted to pay homage to the native roots here. But as has been a topic of discussion in the past few years, like what is honoring and what is tokenizing, and I think we're kind of wrestling with that quite a bit, both nationally, locally, and in this project.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, it would be a good time to talk about this. Do you want to
Yes.
explain this a little bit before we dig into it? Because I think this is a super interesting point.
Sure. So this is directly from the packet, the application packet from 1011. This was in
May 24.
the May 24. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So this was after a long process of when I was on the commission. Not to get into too many of the blocking and tackling, but suffice it to say we were in the site plan portion of we're getting into like the architectural nitty gritty. Okay,
Yeah.
let's get into like the architecture, and at the time, the design that was currently in front of us before this happened was, as one of my colleagues on the commission said, this looks like a Hampton Inn, and she was completely correct, and we were all thinking it, and no one wanted to say it because, to be fair to the architect, like he's just doing the things that he's being asked to do. He is also in the the machine of capitalism and development. So when that was sort of passed along to the applicant, and the applicant was like, okay, we hear you. Like, and it was mentioned that maybe it was in the Friends of the Mahicantuck and several others who were like, why don't you incorporate some, be a little bit more like, what's the colloquial, architecture? What's the indigenous architecture? What's the
Vernacular.
vernacular?
Right.
There we go. It's like, so there was some of that, like, can we, do that? And so when we get the packet, all right, like they went away for a couple months, and they're like, all right, we're coming back, we're ready, like we've done the thing, you're going to be so happy with us. And like this was like page 1 and we were like,
What?
and as we were just saying, like the initial reaction wasn't even like necessarily laughter or scorn. It was just like
Confusion.
Yeah.
just like,
Like,
what
how
is
did you get,
happening?
Like, how do you get here?
Exactly.
Like, to me, you said earlier, a lot of these people don't mean, like, they don't mean to kind of be offensive. They're meaning to be good. Even kind of like the urban designers that are sometimes violent and destructive in how the effects of it. But the question, how do we get here? Like, Jess, you mentioned that you are not a full-time.
Wait, Waleed, you need to unpack what's on the board. Dude, you didn't even talk about it.
Well,
We need to acknowledge for those that maybe don't pay attention to it that this has nothing to do with.
You are the visual expert in this room.
No, I'm
You
just
can
saying.
unpack it for me.
Guys, I have to say, like, if I asked my first-year studio students to come back with a mood board and they brought that, I'd be like, "What are you? I don't understand. Like, what are you studying here? What actually? What are you studying
It makes no
here?"
sense. There's Pueblo style
Southwest.
indigenous housing,
That's
which
not-
is not at all from this area.
You can't even do this here.
No.
Right.
We're
It
kind of
makes
clay.
no
Crazy.
sense.
Adobe, yeah, make an
Yeah.
Adobe building in Lansingburg. Let's see that.
And when you Google search these, a lot of these were just the very
The first, yeah.
ones that came up.
That's
Yeah.
what
There
I'm
was
guessing.
no
I'm guessing the
effort.
intern in the office was asked to put together a Indian Native American board, and he looked for the first few Google image results. Yeah, I think that's like. I think that's just another kind of indication that they're sidestepping a process which needs to be thought through and more thoughtful. And the type of person that maybe wants to just make some quick money on a piece of property also probably doesn't want to go to the library and learn about a people they don't care about anymore.
I
That's
think
not that surprising, I guess.
we should pan to the Holiday Inn style
Yeah.
elevations too, because we were having a great conversation. Stephen, I so appreciate hearing as a member of the planning commission, like, why are we getting and just to speak to being in Archtober and all of the design professionals in Troy, it's like we have great design culture, and I think this does go beyond our community
This
too.
isn't great design to you? This
I mean,
beautiful. Come on.
But
I do wanna be-
why?
It's
and-
better.
And I do
want
wanna be
much worse.
Yes, I want to be clear. This was the improvement.
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
This
Got
was
it.
the improvement. If you
Yeah.
saw,
Is this with the additions of the vernacular?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
is-
Okay.
This is if you see.
It's the timber. Don't
Yes,
you
you
see
Oh,
it?
the
got it.
timber,
Got
some of those elements. I mean, I'm sure we could like dig around and see like what the old ones
Oh,
were.
boy.
But like, I mean, when I say to you that it looked like a Hampton Inn, I mean, it looked like a Hampton Inn with down to the blue and the white. Like it was like, what are we? And you're putting this in the middle of the woods,
Right.
up near nothing.
Well,
it
it's
was just
blue because it's
so-
near the water.
I mean,
You know,
I think
you
he,
got
I think he actually
looking
said
at the
that at one
local.
point.
Yeah,
which,
I
you
bet he
know,
did.
Yeah.
Again, I want to be clear. Like, I am a structuralist. I don't get mad at that particular architect, but like, let's throw the mud at the structure that we are found ourselves in. Like, when it's the logic of capitalism is leading you to this, it's like, man, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Right.
We are
What-
we are not doing it right.
How is this acceptable? Like how
Right.
and it does get accepted, but how is this acceptable as like
Right. And I will also point out, to tie in a couple more strings here, this is a phenomenon that is nationwide and to some extent worldwide, but it is not, it doesn't happen evenly. So there are communities who take their zoning and their architecture guidelines extremely seriously, and they enforce it assiduously. And you try to come in here with some of that crap, no, you're not going to get those approvals. Sometimes you won't even make it to the body because they're like,
Right.
you'll just get a ministerial no, because it's like, well, you're not
Right.
abiding by our thing. Like, come back later when you've abided by our code. So I just want to point out that, like, that's not this. It's yes, there's the larger, like, global structural things, but there's also just, we could do it differently here if
Sure.
we had the political will locally to do so. So it's not as if it's like, well, we have to fix capitalism before we fix these things. Like, no, like, even under capitalism, and because it is under capitalism, we do have the places that tend to have those tighter controls are the wealthier areas that have more power.
Yeah.
it doesn't always result in the
Well,
have the best
yeah.
results too, because you can have these really strict, like,
Oh yeah.
has to look like a colonial.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think I want to go back to, like, how did we get here? Because
Mhm.
it's not like this is cheaper than being maybe a bit more respectful towards whatever your goal is. I mean, clearly they're not hitting the mark in a lot of these things. It's not like that it's necessarily cheaper to do this. It's just they're not culturally aware. They're not culturally educated. I don't even want to say they don't care. It's just I sometimes overestimate how much people are aware and knowledgeable, especially when it comes to visual things. And so, just I was trying to say earlier, you're not a full-time protester or activist. So how do we find change? There's a few avenues. One maybe is going directly to the politicians and saying, demanding change, and you're the professional saying, I know what's right, or whatever it might be, or the kind of the chief, it could say, I know what is appropriate for this land. The second option might be awareness, cultural awareness, visual awareness. And so the question is, especially with the question of social media, and that's like where my brain, because I have my brain is bricked in. That's kind of what I think of. I'm just kind of totally brain rotted. And
Completely
I just look
rotted.
at- Yeah, completely
I've seen
rotted.
it.
So I try to think of, okay, like,
Yeah.
he's seen it, yes.
Yep.
I'm not going to go up to a politician and try to advocate for it, because I know I'm cynical. I know what's going to happen, at least in my perspective. And that's no short kind of, like, I have to applaud those that actually go out there and fight for it. But the question that I ask myself is, what's the role of social media? What's the role of the arts in this? Because when I think of natives, indigenous people, marginalized people in general across the world, I think of documentaries, film that are just so striking and emotional. I can give you a flyer, but I can make you watch a movie that'll make you cry. I can make you watch a TED Talk that'll make you cry. It can be 5 minutes and it'll make you cry and feel something. And also, it's so visually stimulating. Like, there's a difference between reading something and like reading a kind of a factual document, and seeing a film where there's humanization of people, there's visual identity that people clearly don't even know. So, if there's more film festivals showing this stuff, would in the long term, like 10 years, have a larger impact? I think it does. I think it brings awareness. I mean, if we even like switch over to the Palestinian story real quickly, how many people didn't know the story of what people now advocate for, right? It took awareness through social media, not even of like the violence, but just knowing the history, knowing the culture. Like, we tend to live in the dark, especially in this kind of fractured state that social media has now created. And, in a way it's good, in a way it's bad, because there was always like certain media channels that said, this is what's right, this is what's wrong, this is the truth, this is what's not truth. Now that's been fractured. So I wonder the role of social media and the arts, particularly in having a larger effect. Maybe not in the short term, but in the long term. What's your thought on that? Like,
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And yeah, we can shout, we can read all the National Geographics we want and have our pet causes, but until someone with, unfortunately, a following, whether it be an influencer or an artist, or Banksy, right? Oh,
Yeah.
well, there's a new Banksy. What's that about? Even as far as an influencer, as going back to Palestine, during the pandemic, there was an Instagram account that showed up, Quentin Quarantino,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Right? It's not play on Quentin Tarantino, and kind of found its footing. We all were like there, and in the last maybe 4 or 5 months has become like good hard in a good way on Palestine, to the point where he was in the most recent
Yeah, he
Gaza
got
flotilla,
tortured. Yeah.
got
Mhm.
tortured.
Wow.
The amount of people that he alone through his accounts, and no doubt he lost thousands of
Yeah.
followers, but what he reached, it's there is no public relations campaign or a PR out there that could have done that.
And on top of that, he raised, I think, the most money from any influencer out there, millions of dollars.
Millions.
And that goes a long way, because a lot of young people, they are malleable, just like we are. We're malleable. And we sometimes think that the power has to go through the politicians, but sometimes it doesn't, because advocacy could go a long way in different platforms and in different mediums. And so I think the kind of the youth movement has been huge in bringing awareness to certain topics. I mean, the ICE thing is another one. The youth movement is huge. So I wonder how and look, we're speaking in RPI, where there's tons of students. I'm not telling people what you should and shouldn't do. I'm just saying you can go this position, you can go that position. There is a role that social media and the arts and media has. Whatever direction you want to take it, fine, so be it. But I wonder, even like the politicians. I mean, we can go to the New York City race, where Cuomo thinks now all he needs to do is social engineer a cool social media campaign, and he'll win. And of course, policy does matter to a certain degree, and character also does matter. We also have a history.
Yeah.
So, there's that too. But
But that is really instructive, isn't
Yeah.
it? Because I think like one of the things that's not hard not to bring up here,
Mhm.
this is a microcosm, this issue we're talking about, of kind of a similar condition, right? That somebody at a national scale who is just forcing forward with an agenda that is, whatever your opinions are about it. I would argue that, we don't feel maybe represented in many ways. And I think that's instructive to me, that like, instead of waiting for the institution to change or for the right thing to happen democratically, you can create structures that can fight these things. That's why I really respect what you guys are doing, because I think it has to be that way now. Like I said, we're post-institutional to some extent, and I think you have to somehow beat your own path, because no one's going to just do it for you.
I think that's and like our conversations or social media are totally counterpoints to what you would get on the media stage in terms of the conversation of Palestine and ICE and the site here in Troy. It's like these things are not covered by the news. They're just they're not monetized or whatever, And so these other conversation avenues, other media type outlets kind of need to be available. And I think it's amazing that social media has this reach of many like countercultures or conversations that otherwise people would not get connected to via the main outlets.
I would like to have like a training program that trains kind of teenagers to young adults to learn how to be more creative, to kind of speak your mind, right? Because every person has a following, every person has an influence to some capacity, and if they know how to voice themselves, you'll be able to communicate to people how you feel, and they probably feel the same way. Like a lot of times people don't speak up because they're afraid of how other people respond to them. And this issue of like the natives in this country, like a lot of people are advocating for the Palestinians, advocating for protecting people that are being discriminated through anti-Semitism, protecting people that are immigrants that are being detained or whatever it might be. But I still don't hear anything about the Native Americans because the chapter's closed. And I've driven out west, and I've seen some of the conditions, and I don't want to make generalizations, but when I stopped in kind of a local area, and I think I went to drive through McDonald's to get like a drink or something, there was a huge drug problem I saw. There was kind of a lot of homeless people. It didn't look. I hate to say this. They kind of looked like Latinos in a way. They kind of blended in, and I thought I would see something else. Like I didn't. I thought I would hit a boundary and think I'd see something else. But it just looked like Americans that were struggling, because a lot of America is struggling. White, black, whatever. Like America has kind of like it has its own issues, right? So that's what I'm saying. But
For sure.
I think the characterization that the natives don't even exist and don't have a voice. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if they're not detaining Native Americans in
Oh,
these
it's
ICE
happening.
facilities.
They
it
are.
is
Yeah,
definitely
like
Yeah.
happening.
at a large,
Yeah.
yeah. So because like I said, like they're not wearing feathers on their head. They don't live in teepees,
Mhm.
right? At least not that I'm aware for the majority of the reservations I went to. So they their stories don't get heard, right? And I'm sure there are people out there that advocate for it. There's I think like after 2020 there was this after the Black Lives Matter situation, and I'll try to make the point here clear in a second. But um, after 2020, a lot of kind of marginalized groups started speaking up, right? But there's a lot of voices on top of each other, and it seemed weird that the media covered it as they tried to cover each one as they started to protest, like, discrimination towards Asians or Hispanics or whatever. And again, the natives never, like, the natives, from what I've seen on the streets, always protected every marginalized group. They said, it's the colonizers, get out of our country. You're not native to this land. And so it was interesting how the natives always spoke up for the marginalized people, but I don't see the marginalized people speaking up for them. And I don't know. It's just an observation. It's just I'm kind of bothered by it because I'm kind of guilty of just not seeing them a lot of times. Well, they're not here from what I can see. They kind of got pushed to Wisconsin or wherever they got. It's just an observation.
Sure. I mean, and I think you're right though. You know, I don't know if everybody watched Reservation Dogs.
Love it.
We're
Such a good
starting
show.
to see more Indigenous representation. Was it Obama or under Biden? Joy Harjo was our poet laureate. Sterling Harjo, her son, is who's making this wonderful content, or not content, but art and film. And we are seeing more of it, but it is so slow and it is so overdue. But like look back to, what was it? 1970s, when I believe it was Marlon Brando won an Academy Award.
Oh yeah.
And to protest the Indigenous treatment in the United States, he sent Sacheen Littlefeather, and it was John Wayne who was like had to be physically restrained from assaulting her on stage. Like
Wow.
this was on TV.
That's
Yeah.
crazy.
You know,
Did he
so
think he was still playing character? Was he in character?
maybe he was
I
already
don't
at
get it.
dementia at that point. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, there's no representation. There's very little representation, and it might just be, maybe certain communities want to not be identified that way and kind of want to, like, be isolated. If that's hard for me to even say that. I don't know. I'm just saying, like, they don't need to be if they don't want to be. But it just seems like there's not enough representation in Congress, in the Senate, in kind of cinema or Hollywood or whatever it might be. I don't know what the population. Do you guys know what the population of kind of native tribes in this country is? I'm assuming it's very, very low compared to other groups,
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
ethnicities.
A few percentage.
We did a genocide.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
did a genocide, and so
Well, and I think that's maybe one of the reasons that you're kind of keying on is, the Canadian context was still bad.
yeah,
Lots of bad, lots and lots of bad.
Yeah.
But it wasn't quite as intense as the American scenario. And as we were just putting on the screen, the removal of Native folks from the Eastern Seaboard, where all of the sort of like media intelligentsia, seats of government, and it's just been a different relationship with the First Nations of Canada. Again, I'm not saying that things are awesome and wonderful in Canada, but it is
they do
demonstrably
have
better.
Truth and reconciliation
Exactly.
is actually being acted upon. That
Right.
kind
With
of,
all of its flaws, it exists
It's
where we
something,
don't
yeah.
we're just not even sort of engaging with it. And I do echo a point of, I think during 2020, I became aware of Rebecca Nagel and her podcast, which was, fascinating and eye-opening, and kind of shifted my thinking in a lot of ways. But it is, trying to unpack and colonize one's mind is a
Yeah.
very intense process.
I guess
'cause
that's
it's
what I'm
so-
saying. Like, I know I'm guilty of it, and it's
Absolutely.
because of the kind of the identities of American culture that kind of negates seeing other people that have been eradicated completely.
Yeah.
It's also just a complete failure of education. Like, I remember my public school education about it was like, of course we did talk about the Trail of Tears and things, and you have this sad moment in history class, but that's kind of the fallacy, right? You assume that their history stops there.
Yeah.
It's like, no, we should follow that thread. Where are they now? What is like,
I mean,
seriously?
when you drive on 87 and you see, and again, it's not just here; it's all over America. I mean, I grew up around outside of Chicago, and it's everywhere there as well. Also, super disrespectful that like school mascots are these kind of feathered characters. I know, like,
names.
in towns like
Chicago.
yeah.
Chicago.
Yeah, exactly.
The name
Chicago.
Chicago.
The town that my parents live in is also a Native American name.
Illinois.
Yeah.
Saying.
It's everywhere, but it's also not recognized because they're like, yeah, that's a nice British name, Chicago or whatever. Like, we don't even know. Like,
Well,
I'm kind of aware,
one of the most I don't know, hilariously just darkly funny moments in the 10-11 struggle. We mentioned it before of the several of the tribes were in town for that that morning, I would guess. Would you for the
Vigil.
the vigil? Yeah, and I think you probably could tell it better than I could, but
So they're very obsessed with at these city council meetings. Like, you have to give your name, you don't have to legally give your address, but you have to say what town you live in. But anybody in New York State can go and participate at any municipality meeting. So never let residency stop you. And Sachem Hawkstorm, and this was a full house, people standing in the back. We don't have a proper city hall, so it's a conference room that's small, and so there were a lot of people. It was a little hard to hear. The mic always goes out at these meetings without
So
fail.
symbolic.
yes,
It's,
it really is.
The mic is democracy.
That's great. Beautiful.
And Sachem Hawkstorm, bless his heart, goes up, and he says, and they don't. Oh, Sachem's a first name, like, and so she says, I hear you're from Scatticoke, and it was the best mic drop moment, and he was like, I am Scatticoke.
And it was just
right over their
amazing.
head. Okay, you have 2 minutes. Like,
Jeez.
that was the follow.
Okay, he is skeptical. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, and again, like, it's so embarrassing as a Trojan that this is like the modern day, settler colonizer treatment that our elected officials are. I mean, it's such an honor for these folks to show up. And here we are. It just your 2 minutes are up. That's it.
And then to tie it into what we were saying previously, when our institutions aren't even necessarily working for those of us who are, residents of Troy, and then you sort of see, I mean, like, what sort of prayer do we have that these bodies can be responsible to, folks who call this land home, but currently live in Wisconsin and wherever, like, people who have like a just claim here and have should be part of our processes, but we don't even have like the forms. We haven't thought enough about how do we even interact with these forms and structures in ways that would understand and incorporate that in a meaningful and just way. Like, look, I don't even know, I certainly don't have the answers, but I can point out that, like, why are our institutions so maladjusted to not only just hear us who live here right in this moment, but people who have been wronged in the past, who were displaced from this land? What are those structures? Like, what are models can we look to in, South Africa and, maybe the Truth and Justice in Canada? Like, what are these procedures? What are these things that we can begin to make some headway? Because it's, no one understands it. I don't think anyone thinks that, like, making progress on this is going to be easy or quick. I don't think anybody is under any illusions of that. But we're not even trying right now. It's like we have to do better. And to your point, it's like this is true of so many of our institutions. Like, not even just being responsive to these historic, wrongs, and how do we seek justice in that? But, like, we can't. Like, I mean, these institutions are sort of crumbling before our eyes, and you know, I would argue that just I think that I think the liberal order that we've lived in since World War II is just
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
fallen apart.
Absolutely.
Like
It's so, yeah, offensive and like tone deaf. I mean, for just on any concern of the community, like I was looking at the Troy government website today, and for the fact that these conversations that many of the community members are having never appear on the front page, but
Yeah.
also in this like offensive caricature, there's emergency alert. And it says like some eerie canal boat is coming.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
is that really speaking to anyone's
Go on.
sense of
What's
care?
the name of it? The Seneca Chief.
The
Yeah,
Seneca
yeah,
Chief.
Seneca
ironic.
Chief. I mean,
They
come
care about
on.
that, right?
Yeah.
But to your
It's so
point,
offensive. Yeah.
to your point, you see this all these upsetting things happening in politics in America right now. You I think a lot of people feel powerless. They're afraid and all these. But I guess my urgency and maybe just talking to students and when we talk about this is like, well, look, the one thing you can control is there's something happening on your front doorstep that is a microcosm of this
Exactly.
issue. Okay, let's fix one of them. Let's do one thing. And if you can. I don't know. I feel like that's the only way out of this. Is like if we all start paying attention to our front doors and our backyards, and we start looking around. Okay, if we all do that, maybe
Right.
things get better.
Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the unintended consequences of that dominant liberal order that has existed, I mean, at least since World War II, maybe even like New Deal era, it sort of it encouraged us to defer to expertise in a way that's not healthy. Like I think that there's you should always be skeptical of authority, of course, but like we started to and those of us who have expertise in a thing, like you want to honor that, but like to a point where like, oh, they've got it, I'm good,
Yeah,
and people kind of disengaged from the political
Actually,
process.
It's a really good point.
You bring up an interesting point in the way I'm understanding it. We're talking about like the expansion of post World War II, and I actually don't know when this. I don't think necessarily you're speaking about this, but I'm paralleling this. The
Sure.
consultant kind of frenzy that's happened, like the McKinsey,
Yeah.
the Boston
Yeah.
groups, where they're the experts that are going to tell me how you're going to redevelop this land.
Right.
Who the fuck gave you the right? Like, what do you know? And who's paying you exactly? Because usually when they do study groups of like, this medicine's bad. Who paid you? Pfizer? Okay, great. I understand what's going on here. So you bring up a point where like, look, I want to play devil's advocate a lot of times to understand a situation. I want to understand, why is someone doing this? Like, what other people are voting against these kind of policies that maybe the masses want? What or sometimes it's not the masses. Maybe it's like 49-51, right?
Yeah.
Who are the other people? Why are they against it? Why are they against our cause, let's say? I try to put myself in their shoes and try to understand where they're coming from. Because a lot of times a lot of people are after the same thing. It's just miscommunication, and it becomes this like, you're this group, I'm that group. Or, like you said, there's a specialist that said this is actually going to make things better. And so
Right.
we've trusted these so-called specialists without there's no validation to why you're a specialist more than me, right? And so we've kind of gotten this frenzy where like McKinsey and the kind of Boston groups have just taken over.
Yeah.
And like, look, I know people that are consultants. They're dumb as fuck. I'm just gonna be honest. They're not very smart. They just kind of push numbers and throw stuff through Excel and say or like PowerPoint experts. Like, what do you don't know anything.
Yeah, I think I think that this is sort of why we kind of find ourselves in the place that we do, because there was sort of that mid-century hyper specialization. Like, no, you don't need a broad liberal education. Just like learn your craft, learn your trade, be an expert in this one thing, and a lot, sort of that technocratic solution for everything. Your third way, Clintonian and your Tony Blairs that are just like, well, we're just going to put these really smart guys in charge of things, and like things are going to like work out okay. And like I said, I think what like you still see that. My mother, bless her heart, she's the sweetest lady on the planet, like no joke. But she'll just be like, well, it's just that people just don't have the education. And I'm like, it's just not about education. Education is necessary, but not sufficient. Like you definitely need education to understand about the world. But if you think that's the sum total of it, like, man, I don't know what to tell you. Like the folks who are currently dismantling our legal system all went to
they're
Harvard
educated.
and Yale, and like they're unbelievably educated.
When you push a specialization, you silo yourself and then you negate the part of your brain that does critical thinking, right? Where that can see multiple things at the same time
Yeah.
and overlay correlations and then make a decision. But when you're in a silo and you got blinders and don't see anything else, of course you think that's the right answer. And like I said, I don't think, I mean, for sure some of them have bad intentions, but I don't think a lot of these people do have bad intentions. I think part of it is the system and this kind of idea of specialization, how data gets observed, how data gets mined. Um, and again, I don't think there's a plot of like someone's just trying to do bad. There are definitely some people because of
Oh, yeah.
greed and money, but I think a lot of people do mean well. It's just education is not you went to a university. You just
Right.
don't know how to critically think about things because you're so deep in the weeds of one thing that you're a specialist in.
So I interpreted your comment in a slightly different way,
Sure.
but I think a related way is just like this idea that somehow you always trust that there's an expert looking out for you, right?
Correct.
And you always think like, well, there's a safety net there. And I think we're all feeling the fact right now that no, there's not.
No.
There's no adults in the room.
Right.
This is it. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what I was getting at before is like, I think we're in a moment when you can't rely on the expert, right? And you can't rely on institutions or safety nets. That's like the only action is going to come from grassroots. That's just what it is right now.
Yeah, and like, I think it's important to like point out that like there's one of my professors whose name will come to me in a minute. He worked with a lot of communities post Sandy in New York City. That the communities that had stronger bonds before the storm, that had more community connections, institutions, grassroots organizations, those were the places that rebounded the quickest. It wasn't like, oh,
Wow.
FEMA came in and did the thing, and it's like in a lot of cases, the places where FEMA went in, which unfortunately tended to be the more wealthy areas, and they got all the attention from FEMA because
They
the
have
electeds just said like,
insurance
hey,
and-
you need to like
Yeah.
get over here, and handling insurance. But it was actually the communities that had these like really strong bonds that were working with FEMA sometimes, and other times they were like, well, FEMA's not getting it done, so we're just
Yeah,
gonna
yeah.
start doing it.
Right.
So it's, and I say that not to like, I think it's important that we don't go too far with this idea that like we need these institutions.
Yeah.
Like
absolutely.
we should be fighting to ensure that these institutions get back to working for us. I do think what's important is that they're probably not going to look like and operate the same way that they, I'm not a huge necessarily big Mayor Pete fan, but I actually saw him like, talking about this as like, and I actually agree with him. It's like, yeah, like this is with all of this dismantling, for us to just put it right back to where it was
Would be silly.
would be just incredibly silly because it wasn't really working that well before. So
Right.
like, why would we just like focus on like, well, we got to get back to normal.
Yeah.
I don't know that normal's good. And again, that is not just true of the national level, but like,
Totally.
here in Troy, like when we've got a full just over a tenth of the positions are vacant at City Hall, like those positions, like we are meaningfully losing services here. This is not just like, oh, well, we're doing more with less. It's like, no, we're doing less with less. And the mayor just released her budget, and it's, well, we're just gonna keep just this tiny little like, bump up, and like, wait a minute, this is like the vacancies you're planning on not filling these positions. Like that's, so we're just gonna say like, no more. And again, like just the other day, one of my former co-commissioners pointed out that one of the buildings that came before the commission just before my time, I mean, of course he was the chair of the commission, so he's intimately familiar with all of the details. They went through the entire site plan process, and he was riding his bike by this site, by this building, and it's not at all what was agreed to in the site plan. Why? Like that is supposed to be the job of code enforcement, and right now that's just simply not happening. Now, is that because we don't have enough people? Is it because the folks that are in code don't necessarily have the same priorities as is laid out in law? I have thoughts, but I don't necessarily want to get too far into speculation. But it's meaningful in like this process that we've been undergoing with 1011. The amount of like time and detail and attention to detail that have gone into uh, all of these plans, even if like heaven forbid we get to a point where this thing does move forward, we still we there's still not necessarily a guarantee that like, well, at least we won
Yeah.
this and that, some kind of compensation, but
Who will enforce it?
who will
Yes,
enforce it?
absolutely.
So and especially when we tie it back into design, that appears to be the least prioritized by code right now. Again, I don't know this. This is just Stephen Maples wildly speculating. But like when I look at the things that I observe code doing, um, this is just like not on their radar of like, well, we got to make sure that these developers and landlords are like, when they say this is what I'm doing, here it is in writing. In theory, you're supposed to be held to that.
Right.
So it's not just like the destruction of these institutions are like way out there in on the national level, but like it's here and it's in this fight as well.
Yeah. Can I ask maybe one? I know we're getting close on time, but we didn't maybe get into the mechanics of the opposition as much, but just what's next? Like what's the next step in this thing?
Yeah.
So right now we're in the seeker, the environmental review process. This is the second time we've been through it. So over the first 5 years of this, we've gone through the seeker environmental review process. We got what's called a negative declaration, which the criteria for which is just that there is no possible significant adverse environmental impact. So any idiot with a brain, the clear cutting of a forest on a river, there's going to be some adverse impacts. Doesn't mean you can't build. So that is what, and then the city granted a zoning change against, and then variances as well against, and we can't agree on anything in this city, but against unanimous opposition. And so we sued the city. We sued and successfully won and overturned both the environmental review decision as well as the zoning decision. Wow. But it just put the developer back at square one. Unfortunately, that doesn't mean he can't build. So we're back at it again. We're back in the environmental review. The planning board is lead agency. So they're essentially stewarding the environmental review. Already, it's not exactly going as was written out in the DEC, bylaws for seeker. We're still waiting for a determination of significance, which should have come around early July. But I look at all delay as a good delay. We've been delaying this for 5 years. That's 5 years of every being in this forest being able to stay alive, right. And 5 years of carbon sequestration and oxygen, and delay is good. And they're having to spend a lot of money for this delay. So we're waiting for another determination of significance. Obviously, we want the opposite of the negative declaration, a positive declaration, which just means, okay, there's more to study. And we can freely say, like, okay, archaeology, ecology, there are so many aspects of it. There are state and county rare species on this site. There are some of the largest trees in Rensselaer County by diameter. We had an arborist from More Trees Collective speak at the most recent meeting, who said in his 40 years of being an arborist, he has never seen so many native over 40 species in one spot. Wow. And this is not 100 acres. This is 10 acres in the city. So whether we get a negative declaration or a positive declaration will determine how we move forward. But either way, at that point, then the developer can apply for the zoning change. And really, that's where we have the opportunity to stop things. We can't stop it with the environmental review. So that's kind of what's next. Sadly, this has turned into creating a record so that should we have to challenge these decisions again, we are ready to go. And so that's kind of where we are right now. And it's organizing, right? It's still getting the community involved. It's still getting folks out. It's keeping people aware. I mean, and back to your all's point about how can we be engaging the community better right now. first off, if I had been at work that day in December when the archaeologists were there, I wouldn't know till the zoning change was happening, because that's the only time they're legally required to email, to send some mail to, people within a very close range of where there's a zoning change. Now, the last meeting, my zoning change, my form from planning, the envelope was empty. It was a mixed message, and I'm sure it was just an oversight.
Sure.
Much like code, planning is very understaffed here, and we're expecting, what is it, 3 people?
It's basically 3 people.
3 people
Wow.
to overlook. I mean, these plans alone, just from our group, have 40 people looking at them.
I mean, you're talking thousands of pages for just
One
this one
project.
project. Thousands.
Yeah.
That needs expertise and all of it. It's a lot.
Yeah. So, I'm all for, hiring for planning as well, because it will make our city stronger.
So what can we do as a community? Like what can people do to assist in this process or advocate? Or I know you guys are in a middle of a process right now, but like what could people do?
Right now, it's writing submissions. Of course, coming and speaking is great, but submissions are easier and probably a little bit more impactful. Stating their opposition to this project and listing reasons why. That's what we're doing, getting things on the record. And as we were successful in our last court challenge, it was largely because of the record that we created. And it wasn't for consultants that we hired, it was the community. And so, and also, if you have any expertise in any aspect of Seeker, please reach out.
Yeah.
Right now, we're looking for someone with geotechnical expertise, if anybody knows anybody. But community engagement, right? This is where it comes out. Also, we are in a city council election year right now. We are currently a Republican-held council. We're hoping there's a very progressive slate of Democrats running from D1 to D6. And so get involved in your local elections. Some of them are going to be very, very tight. One person's going up against a Republican firefighter. And it's going to be a tight election. And that the next council is likely who's going to hear the zoning change. So, I'll be out canvassing for D1 Phil DiLorenzo tomorrow. And there are lots of events leading up to November 4th, I think, is election day. But yeah, just getting involved. We've got an Instagram, Friends of the Mahicantuck. And Mahicantuck is an anglicized version of the name Mahicantuck, which is the Algonquin word, the name for the river that flows both ways for the Hudson. We anglicized and made it a little bit easier to spell. But we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, and we've got a website, which is easier, save1011.org. But getting involved this truly has been a community lift this entire 5 years.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in to say, yes, the first thing, do the emailing, and again, get in touch, but like emailing the board. I know we talked about like whether or not the board will they take that into account? Well, if we don't try, they definitely won't. So do the thing, like, especially, as I mentioned, the board is constrained by certain laws. So, we'll be putting out materials that'll help people write very specific kinds of letters and things that will attack the required criterion that are there in law. So we'll help people like, narrow and sharpen those messages. So that's
through the website
or through the socials and whatever.
Cool.
Okay.
So we'll definitely be doing that. Come out and talk, come out and speak for sure. And the I want to like sort of highlight the like getting engaged. We sort of talked about like what do we do in this moment of all of these things kind of falling apart. Troy is not a large city. It's really not. It's a small city. Like if just a few of us start getting together and putting our heads together and doing a little bit of work on this and on that, on 1011, some of these other issues that are going on in the city. We mentioned the new city hall proposal and the things that were maybe a little bit wrong-headed about that. Well, if we all kind of come together, do a little bit of work, you'll be surprised at the impact that you can have. It doesn't necessarily mean that we will be successful in this particular fight, but as Jess was saying, we have these elections coming up very, very soon, and that can really reshape the power dynamics of what's going on in the city, and especially like Jess was saying, like this new slate of folks that are running, that are challenging, are really, I know we just kind of poo-pooed about like, expertise, but like these folks actually understand what's going on, because our current council, I would argue, doesn't necessarily have a great grasp of what all of the things that are in play right now. So that's a problem. Like we need people who are not only, again, what we were saying, like not only have the knowledge, but also like have some empathy and understanding of like what's actually happening here. What are the stakes of that are going on right now? And I would say my current representative is just doesn't care or doesn't understand or is just I mean, it's like, he's checked out. Not, and I he would not say that he's checked out, but it's like, man, like we keep telling you that these things are not. You're not doing things according to law, and he's just like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh,
So and so
geez.
told me that I'm doing good, and it's like, you're a legislator. You can look it up. The law, the thing that you create, you
Yeah,
can look it
yeah.
up, and it's right there. And I'm showing it to you, and he's like, no, but like so and so said, and you're like,
What?
okay, man, like so
Wow.
it's those kinds of things that like, in this moment of like where we like I go through it on not on maybe not quite daily basis, but a near daily basis of feeling like the world is just, it's too late, we're done, we're cooked. And then, you know, the thing that always regrounds me and gets me back into a good headspace is actually physically going out there and organizing with people, whether that's, in electoral capacity, getting involved in these campaigns, whether it's getting involved in issue advocacy, whether it's joining an organization that's going to stick around for a while, whether your Indivisibles, your DSAs, your whatever, join one of these groups and do something, because it's this is the only way that we're going to get through this. It's not just recognizing that things are broken and getting on a doomerism, just doom scrolling forever. The only way we're going to begin to like right the ship, and create, to frankly, a better future, is following my comrades down in New York City of like, they're just decided, we're not going to do this, we're going to have a better future, we're going to decide to do things differently. And it just means that each of us getting out, contributing a little bit of time, a little bit of money, a little bit of your effort, and creating those bonds. Like I also want to make sure that people understand that organizing is about connecting with your fellow human. It's not this thing that you go and do in a a nonprofit, like you walk in and you do the thing and then you leave. It's no, like organizing is bonding with people and making sure that and feeling that connection. And that's the thing that'll keep you motivated. And that my liberation is combined with yours. Like it's inseparable. And that's the thing that at least for me, like keeps me motivated and saying like, I feel terrible, I'm depressed, and I hate life. You know what? I'm just going to go out and do another canvassing shift today. And you know what? I go and talk to people, talk to my neighbors, and it's like, I feel like a new man. You just go like, oh, right. We're all trying to like suffer through this together, and we all want to see uh, some kind of change. And the good news is that in Troy, a lot of us are like fairly on the same page about we really need a different kind of leadership. We need a different kind of approach to um, the planning and zoning issues that we face, and even the architecture issues that we face. To pull it all the way back around is like, we're not going to change these things by just step one is identifying the issue, but then we've got to do something about it. We've got to actually motivate and organize ourselves. That's the only way forward.
Yeah, I think like to end your point of, it's very easy to doom scroll. I mean, I do doom scroll all the time, but also
Don't
teach.
we all?
And like teaching and talking to people always kind of brings me back to reality, which is, people do share similar ideas, and we brought that up earlier, and that's kind of a spark of hope.
Mhm.
And like I believe that protesting, demonstration is very important. And I also know that, especially for the younger folk, maybe they're uncomfortable with it. Maybe for the older folk, they're uncomfortable with it. there's ways of you know being participatory with the larger effort and community, and that might be social media, that may be actually in person. Probably is better in person, so like, you can bond.
Please, yeah.
But this was a kind of an honor to have you guys here, to hear your thoughts and to bring up something extremely important. I think we got a pretty in-depth conversation. We went all over the place, but I think it was all productive. And I appreciate you both, Jess and Stephen, for coming today.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank
Well,
you
thank
so
you for
much.
having
so much
us.
for having us and giving an outlet to talk more about this. You know, and no war but class war.
Yes, that's right.
And join us at Cafe Euphoria if you'd like to meet in person.
Yeah, and keep
We'll
discussing.
be heading down there. Yeah.
All right. Thank you all.
Thanks.